Gotten a lot out of this workshop so far. So when this is over, you're going to have the entire system to go out, take more listings than you ever have before. And I want to do just a quick recap. And the first week we talked about where to find your leads at. Hopefully you guys have got your lead sources and stuff picked out. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, I was hearing some feedback. So I was actually hearing myself talk after I talked. So anyway, that's cool. So first week we talked about where to find your leads at. And hopefully you guys have got your lead sources picked out. If you haven't, I think I told you Red X is offering some special deals. Just call them and tell them you're in Jason Morris's group, and they'll waive setup fees and give you some special packages. You should have your pre-listing package together. You guys are in week 2 of your brand new schedule. You've got some scripts and you know how to use them. We've talked about follow-up some, which is one of the most important parts of the business. Follow-up is just as important as the initial call, maybe even more important than the initial call. If you're not going to follow up with people, then you really you don't really need to make the first call either. If you aren't following up like a machine, you are losing money right now. But you've got an easy system for setting your goals. You've got some strategies on building a bulletproof mindset. You got some strategies on how to get in state to make your calls and perform at a peak level. If you learn how to control your state and get in that peak level performance mode, you can control everything in your life, and prospecting is going to be so much easier. So the rest of this workshop, I want to finish up setting you guys up to win. You guys are going to be like Donald Trump keeps saying, you're going to get tired of winning. If you follow this system, you're going to be sitting on your couch with your significant other in 6 months going, I've got so many listings, I'm worn out from calling realtors. I'm worn out from calling for sale by owners and taking listings, and I'm worn out from these realtors calling me about selling them. You guys are just going to get tired of winning. That's when you guys are going to get more selective over the clients you take. Right now, if you don't have any listings, your job is to go on appointments and take listings. And you need to take them all. Don't get selective. If you've got 2 listings in MLS right now, now's not the time for you to get selective. As you get busier and you grow your listing inventory, that's when you get selective. Right now, all those pretty signs you guys bought with your pictures on them and different stuff, they're not doing you any good if you're riding them around in the trunk of your car. So this week we've got a lot planned, and it probably end up going a few minutes longer than normal, but I want to make sure we get everything into 4 weeks. I've got so much stuff I really want to cover. It just keeps kind of growing, and I keep going, man, I left out this or I left out that. But I want to give you guys as much value to grow your business in this 4 weeks as I possibly can. So this week, we're going to talk about your pricing strategy. We're going to talk about your listing paperwork, not your pre-listing package. We're going to talk about your listing paperwork and how to present it. We talked about your net sheet a little bit earlier, but we're going to talk about setting up your net sheet and what all needs to go into it. And then we're going to talk about, I want to give you guys something to prospect. We're going to talk about your sphere of influence and just some easy strategies to work those people and work that sphere of influence, cost effectively. So first thing we're going to cover is your pricing strategy. Now, you guys have to have an easy way to explain your pricing strategy and a real strategy that's going to make sense to yourself and make sense to your sellers when you talk to them about it. You need a strategy they can buy into. I hear agents, they constantly talk about sold when pricing a house, but I've got news for you. If you're pricing based on solds, then you're probably doing it wrong. You need to use an active listing pricing strategy. Now, I know a lot of you haven't heard of this before because nobody really talks about pricing strategies in the real estate business, and nobody talks about an active pricing strategy. Everybody just talks about solds, but when I explain this to you here in a second, you're going to understand it, and it's going to make a lot of sense to you, and you're going to be able to explain it to your sellers, and it's going to make a lot more sense to them too. So I know you probably know how to log into your local MLS and pull comps and properties that have sold. If you're in a market that's trending upward, you're probably losing the listings to agents that are pricing properties higher than you are. A lot of them are probably just getting lucky or pricing the house to get the listing. But in a market that's rapidly moving upward, taking a listing at 5 to 10% higher than what you really think is going to sell, or 5 to 10% higher than the solds, that's not that big of a deal. Lots of times the market's going to catch up to it if your market's trending up. If your market's trending down, you kind of need to do the same thing. You need to price towards the bottom of what's really available. You got to constantly be pricing ahead of the market. So this pricing strategy, the active pricing strategy, not only to get their house sold, but it's going to be easier to explain to sellers, and it's going to show you how to price ahead of the market. The way you price ahead of the market is you price based on the actives, not the solds. You want to price based on what the listing is actually competing with in today's market. Buyers buying a house today, they're looking at homes that are on the market today. They're comparing them to other homes on the market. They might want to look at that house that sold in January for $20,000 cheaper, but that house that sold last month or 6 months ago, that house is already gone. It's kind of like if you went to JCPenney and you wanted to buy bed sheets. All you have to look at is what is at JCPenney today. If they don't have the bed sheets that you want at the price that you want to pay for them, then you can't get them. And that's the same way houses are too. You can only look at what's available. Most of these agents that are pricing homes with solds, they're usually underpricing their listings. Pricing based on solds is almost like driving your car looking in the rearview mirror. The house that sold last month or 6 months ago just doesn't matter. And for that house to come, if you got a serious buyer looking today, and that house were to come back on the market, it's going to be at a different price. It's not going to be at the same price it sold for a month ago or 6 months ago. So what you do is you take the home and you pull active listings that are actually comparable. You go inside the community. If you're in more of a rural area, you want to look inside the community at what's active. Then you want to go out maybe a 1 or 2 mile radius. In my market, if I'm closer to Myrtle Beach where the population and housing is more dense, I do a smaller area, or I look just at the neighborhood. If I'm going out 20, 30 minutes away from the beach and the more dense area, then sometimes I'll go out 2, even 3 miles. So you want to pull active listings that are comparable from inside the community or a radius around the home. If the home is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a 2-car garage, it's 1,500 square feet, you want to look at 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes with a 2-car garage that are around 1,500 square feet. Look up actual comparables. With custom homes, it gets a little bit more difficult, but you just compare the home's actual real features to the features of other available homes. Usually unless their home is something really special, I want to be priced one of the lowest comparables in that area. So if there's 10 homes in the area, I want to be the lowest. I want to be within the lowest 3 or 4. Then I want to be able to pick out the reasons and features that make this listing better than the other 3 or 4. For example, I took a listing yesterday. It was a for sale by owner, and the guy's house I was figuring was worth about $75,000 to $80,000. With what he wanted to get out of it and everything, we needed to price it about $85,000. But after I talked with him and I talked to him about features, I realized that his house was actually sitting on 2 lots. It was actually, he owned 2 lots that were going with the house, but his house was only sitting on 1. So it actually wasn't a big deal just to cut off that second lot and build another house right next door. So I thought that was a big selling feature, that even though we're priced a little bit higher than where I thought we should be, we've got a lot that he can cut off that's worth probably about $30,000. But whatever this unique feature is, and whatever the reasons are that your house is priced higher than other ones, it needs to be something you can really justify. Like, maybe those 2 or 3 houses that are at the bottom of the market, maybe they're priced at $145 and your seller wants $155. You need to be able to justify getting that $155. Does it have a new roof? Does it have a bigger home lot? Does it have a more desirable home lot? Maybe more square footage, maybe a sunroom that the other one doesn't have. You need to be able to pick out those things that are really a plus. That way you can convince people that it's worth that extra $5,000 or $10,000. So you want to show up to these listing appointments you're going on. You want to be very prepared with your pricing strategy. I typically will print out comparables, the actual comparable active listings, and I'll look down through the pictures. I'll look through the descriptions real quick. I'll make some notes on them so that I can justify why their house is better or worse than them. And I try to pick out 3 or 4 of these. Sometimes if I have 10 or 12 comparables that are actually competing with them. I'll make some notes on each one that I can go through. But the more you prepare with comps and details about the comps, the more likely it is you're going to get the listing. I always pull comps real quick before putting together a net sheet. When you pull comparables and you go through your pricing strategy, you want to make sure everything you do with pulling comps and comparables, whatever prices you have on your net sheet, that your comparables support your net sheet. Don't show up with a net sheet or send over a net sheet to the clients and then go down through comps sitting in their house that tell a completely different story. If you do that, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So now you got this active pricing strategy. I'm going to talk to you about your net sheet and setting it up. If you guys aren't using a net sheet, you're doing yourself and your clients a disservice. This net sheet eliminates so many objections. It's a vital part of what I typically send over to clients when I first email them, and then I go over it again in the listing appointment. This is one of the primary things. This and active comparables are the two primary things I talk about in a listing appointment. They've already got your pre-listing package, so they already know what marketing you're going to do when you're showing up. So like yesterday when I went over, I pulled out my net sheet when I was going down through the information that I brought him. I show it to him. I went down through it real quick, explaining everything. Most of these people, like I've told you, everything needs to be on like a third grade level. The people that you're meeting with, typically, most of them have never sold a house before. Or if they have sold a house before, they've probably not sold more than 2 or 3. So everything needs to be super easy to understand and super easy for you to replicate for every appointment. But the net sheet is so your client can actually see exactly what they're going to put in their pocket before their mortgage is paid off. No matter what people tell you, they know roughly what their mortgage balance is. And sometimes they don't want to tell us what it is. And that's okay, because this net sheet's just giving them an idea of what they're going to put in their pocket after real estate commissions, attorney fees, and other common charges come out of the gross. Oftentimes sellers have these crazy ideas about what it's going to cost them to use an agent. This net sheet, it just lays them all out. It shows them, we're looked at as not being very trustworthy, our profession. This net sheet lays everything out there so they've got an idea, and you're being completely upfront and honest with them. I do mine. If you look in the secret group, I've got my template actually in there. You guys can, it's in Excel. You can use it and modify it to fit your market. But I do 3 columns with the price I want to list their house in the middle. So I set it up so column 1 is the low column. Column 2 is where I want them to price it. Column 3 is usually the high end of what I think the property is sell for. I do the column 3 a little bit higher, because if I show up and, they got granite countertops, they got tile in the kitchen and bathrooms, they got a beautiful sunroom or back porch that I didn't know about and other houses don't, I want to be able to change my game plan up a little bit and go towards the higher end if it turns out they've got features they just didn't tell me about. And sometimes that happens, that you show up and it's better than what you think it is. But you should have an idea of the dollar amount your client wants to walk away with from the sale. If it's reasonable or low. I try to make sure the net amount in at least one of the columns is priced. It is showing them with a net that's comparable to what they're wanting to put in their pocket. If the price they're needing is just way more than what the market's going to bring, it's really, really out of line. You probably shouldn't go to that appointment. I do have times where I set up an appointment that I call the person back later that day after pulling comps and setting up the net sheet, and I just tell them, hey, Mr. Seller, I told you we could get you $100,000, but after doing some research, I can't get you that price. I can only get you $90,000. And sometimes they already know this, and they just tell you, hey, that's fine, and they appreciate you being honest with them, and they want you to go ahead and come to their house. So sometimes you just end up canceling. Sometimes you end up going and taking a good listing that's actually priced right. Different markets, you may have some different fees. The fees that I put in my net sheet, these are the typical ones, and I'll go down through those with you. You're planning and preparing them for a smooth closing. If they have title issues, problems, the attorney or title company might charge more. But I wouldn't worry about that. For the purpose of the net sheet, you're assuming this is a typical transaction with no issues. In my market, I include in each problem. You guys can modify this. I always include the sales price in the top column. It's number 1. Number 2, attorney or title fees. You guys can probably go to your attorney's office or your title company you work with. Typically, they charge the same fee for a seller no matter what the size of the transaction. The local attorney I work with charges $350 for seller transactions. I put $400 in the attorney block just because everybody's happy when things turn out to be a little bit lower. In my market, they charge a transfer tax. We call them deed stamps in our market. They typically, the formula the county uses is 10 miles long. If you break it down, you can probably come up with something that's a little bit simpler, but in our market, it's about $3.75 per 1,000, and that's on the high end. Every market I find has some version of this. Just break it down, make it simple to understand, or simple to put in your spreadsheet. Admin and courier fees, it never fails. Every closing I do has some sort of $50 attorney fee or add-in. I just include that in my net sheet. Commission rate, don't forget about this one. I always factor in 6%, factor in, whatever you typically charge. In our market, we typically have the termite letter, so I go ahead and put that in my net sheet. Then last, I always put a miscellaneous section where I put $1,000 miscellaneous in the spreadsheet, and this is for one big reason. It gives them some cushion for repairs, a home warranty. If there's something that you may not know about, like an HOA satisfaction letter or HOA transfer fee, I just go ahead and tell them. I say, hey, I put a miscellaneous $1,000 in there just in case there's something I don't know about. But during the listing appointment, I go down through each one of these items. I don't go into a lot of detail, but I point it out. I explain it kind of just like I did to you guys. When putting together your net sheet, you really want to make it as simple as you possibly can so that anybody can understand it. I can't say that enough. I see some of these net sheets in other training programs that are just way, way over the top. I see some mortgage companies that give away free ones to agents, and those are fun for your personal use. Most people you're going to be meeting with, like I said, they've never sold a home before. Even the most experienced sellers that I run into, they haven't been through the home selling process more than a few times. We don't always work with these investors that have sold, a couple of hundred houses. We forget, we see this stuff every day, and a lot of us live and breathe real estate. Your average client isn't like this at all. This is one of their first transactions. Plus you don't want something very elaborate. Make your net sheet as simple as possible. You don't want something real elaborate that creates a lot of work for you every time you have to do it. If it's too complicated, you're just not going to do it. And all these systems we talk about, I've been really trying to break them down and make them as easy as possible, because I know even for myself, if it's too complicated, I'm just not going to do it. So the next thing we want to talk about is your listing paperwork. And I know that some of you are probably thinking, why does Jason want to talk about contracts and listing paperwork? Jason doesn't work in my state, or my broker constantly has classes going over this. But this is something I see over and over again with agents. Your broker probably has a class talking about all your contracts and listing paperwork, and they go down through this stuff with you word for word. And then you turn around and you go through it with your clients word for word. And, the first thing is, when most brokers are having this class, they tell you all this scary stuff that's in these documents. And let's face it, there's actually some scary stuff in there. They tell you all these crazy stories that literally happened one time in the history of your state real estate commission. And then you turn around, a lot of agents, they'll tell their clients these same stories. And, the contracts, these are legal contracts. They have this whole Megan's Law thing about sex offenders. Most listing paperwork has a section about how we can sue you if you don't pay us, a section about how we're responsible for nothing, and then a whole mediation clause that's kind of confusing. There are a lot of big words, there are legal words, scary things, and most people, this is the first time they've ever seen this, and it's a legal document. Nobody likes them. It's always boring. And, if you're going through it word for word, you're probably having a lot of clients that you get to the end of it and they say, oh, I want to think about this, or I want to, let me read over this and I'll have to call you. And, then you just don't get the listing. Then on top of it, most people think, they might not tell you this, but they actually think it's insulting for you to read word for word to them 6 or 10 pages or however long your listing paperwork is. The mistake that I see over and over is most agents don't really know what the paperwork says or how to explain it easily. In the state of South Carolina, there are only like 4 or 5 contracts and forms that we use, and most agents use, and even some brokers don't really know what they say or how to explain them easily. So when you're meeting your clients, you want to be able to completely and effectively go through your paperwork as quick and as painlessly as possible. And you want to do this too, like your net sheet. You want to do this too on like a 3rd grade level. So I can't really help you guys with this in other states. I only know about South Carolina paperwork, but you should take your listing paperwork, get really familiar with it, read over it like a few times on your own, and then pull out a sheet of paper and write out a short explanation for each section. Just paraphrase that. You shouldn't go through it word for word with your client. You could probably ask your broker in charge. If you're with EXP, our broker in charges are fantastic, and they'd actually probably go down through this with you and coming up with some short explanations. But and two, you want to send the whole listing package over, the listing paperwork package over to your pre-listing package so they can read it before time. But for example, in the state of South Carolina, the state contract has a section about Megan's Law, which is the sex offender registry. They have a 2-inch paragraph that basically says, if you care about the sex offender registry and who's on it, there's a website you can look it up. And it's so much less painful to give this short explanation. And you can do this while making sure that you have all the important points down. I really believe a lot of agents, you're not getting the listing because you don't know how to properly explain the paperwork and you're overcomplicating it. So you guys need to write out a script and practice explaining this to somebody, practice presenting it, practice with another agent in your office or your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend. They're going to love going down through this with you. But your closing ratios at appointments are going to go through the roof when you learn how to explain this more properly. You probably should do this with buyer contracts too. I include my listing paperwork in every pre-listing package I send out. The version that I email to people is a clean copy that has everything filled in except the seller's name, property details, the price, and dates. And that's the one I email over to people. You want to make sure you have it highlighted everywhere the client needs to sign an initial too. And I go ahead and send it over to them for 2 reasons. I want to make sure that they know I'm planning to meet them to do business. I don't go to people's homes to preview houses. I come to their home to get it on the market and start the process of looking for a buyer. I want them to be familiar with the paperwork. And most people, before you meet them, they'll look at your pre-listing package and they'll at least pull up and skim through the paperwork stuff too, so they know that you're showing up there to do business with them. When I show up to the listing appointment, though, all the paperwork that we have for the state of South Carolina and all that my brokerage requires, I have it all filled out except for the price. I like to fill in the price when I'm sitting in front of the client, but I'm 100% prepared when I get to somebody's house. I learned this from reading Lou Holt's books. He was the coach. He was coach for Notre Dame. He was the coach for the South Carolina Gamecocks. And reading his books, he talked about how much he prepared for every single game. And I started doing my listing appointments and listing paperwork the same way. So, and I know there's a lot of agents out there that like to do this whole process all digital, the listing process. The sales process, though, it's not nearly as effective when you're sitting in front of people asking them to digitally sign paperwork on an iPad or tablet. The net sheet, they can't hold it in their hand. They can't look at it. Most of us agents, especially if you're in this workshop, you guys are pretty tech savvy. I mean, this is, the technology that you guys are using right now, it's on a different level. Most of our clients could never log in and do this, even as simple as it is. They're just not tech savvy. The whole process is going to be so much easier when you actually print out your paperwork, have it all highlighted, and sit there in front of them and go down through it. Also, I find that people are less likely to negotiate commission rates when the commission blank's already filled in. I just can't stress enough, you have to and you must show up completely prepared for your appointment, like prepared to the point with your net sheet, the comparables, and the listing paperwork, prepared to the point that it almost seems ridiculous. For me, I've created a ritual around this whole thing. It takes me about 10 minutes now to set up my whole package. I use zip forms, so my basic contract's already filled out. I just got to go plug in their property information. But, set up your Gmail. If most everybody uses Gmail, Gmail has a feature called canned emails. set it up so your initial email that goes out, your listing paperwork, all that's already set up in a canned email, or it's sitting on top of your desktop computer or your laptop or whatever, so you can drag and drop everything in the email. I've got my whole thing set up so I can send out the whole package to a seller within about 10 minutes. And then once I pull the comps and everything, I'm ready for a listing appointment in about 10 or 15 minutes. To make it all easy and set up all this stuff in templates for yourself, because you're going to use it over and over. And the easier it is for you to access this stuff, the more likely it is you're going to do it. And two, it's going to, when you show up really prepared, it's going to really set the tone for your whole meeting. The listing I got yesterday, the guy, I want to tell you guys this story. There was another agent that was meeting with them, and a couple of you guys that are in my market, you guys know who it is. The guy's, and I'll tell you, it's Bill Bellamy with Century 21. He is a Mike Ferry agent that is an excellent presenter, and he met them before me, and he showed up. He didn't have a net sheet. He didn't have all the paperwork filled out. He met them, looked at the house, told them that he would set another appointment with them to do all the paperwork. I showed up prepared with my net sheet, my paperwork, everything. And the guy looked at me and he goes, I really like you done your net sheet. You showed up ready to do business with me. I said, yes, sir. I got signs in my car. He ended up, it took me about 30, 40 minutes with the whole thing. We went through all the paperwork. I handed him the ink pen. He started initialing and signing everything. He listed with me over the other agent because I was prepared. If that other agent would have showed up with a net sheet, all the paperwork, comps, everything like I did yesterday, I would have never been able to go to that appointment. Most agents do not prepare for anything. And so that's something important that I've learned, and that's something that all of you guys need to do. Show up over-prepared for appointments. So the last thing I want to talk about today, and this is kind of the biggest portion of it, I'll try to get down through it as quick as possible so Gene can say a couple things and we have a few minutes for question and answer. But I want to give you guys something about prospecting or generating business. Like, every week of this I've tried to. So I want to talk to you about your sphere of influence. We all know way more people than what we think we do. And this is kind of a tricky subject because a lot of agents don't really know how to effectively work their sphere of influence. I feel like a lot of agents talking about building their sphere of influence, they just don't get it. If you're brand new to the business, this is going to be a little bit more work for you than if you've been in the business for a while. So I've talked to a lot of you, and a lot of you are like me when I first started. You live in an area. I was brand new to Myrtle Beach when I started. I didn't have a sphere of influence, or I didn't think I did. And it just takes some time to build up. And if you're at that level where you're brand new to a market, it's going to take you time to build a sphere of influence. But if you start getting it organized now, it's going to be easier as you go. So what you need to do initially is you need to make a list of people who live in your market that you know. I'll post some information to give you some ideas. So index cards really work for making this list. A notebook works well. You can use a CRM like Realty Juggler. That's great. But Facebook is the best CRM for working your sphere of influence. But you need to get a list of these people together, and you need to get it together in an organized manner. So I'll give you a couple ideas on how to work with your sphere of influence and how to stay in contact with them. I know there are a lot of programs out there that you can do. Like there's an 8-8 program and a 32-touch program. And, we all know there's a popular real estate company that made a lot of these programs really popular. But a lot of these programs, like the 32 touches, man, it's really expensive and it's really labor intensive. And I'm just not really sure that you need that nowadays because the world's a lot simpler. Most of the time you don't need 32 touches, or we don't need to do 32 touches like we did, 5 years ago. And the truth of it is most of your sphere of influence is too busy to have a 15-minute phone conversation with you during the middle of their day. My grandma don't even have time for me some days to make a 10, 15-minute call to her, and they don't look at your postcard either. Your postcard, we get so much junk mail, that just gets lost in the stack of junk mail and it gets thrown away. But you need to divide your people into two groups. The people that you just know, like the person that's out there, you know who they are and they know who you are. And you're friendly, but maybe you don't really know a lot about them and their family. That's one group of people. The second category of people, is people that you know that know a lot of other people, and you make a list of everybody, then you make a list of the most influential ones. And these are the ones, the most influential ones. Those are the ones you do want to call and the ones you want to make that extra little bit of effort with. Think of the people that come in contact with the most people or the ones that come in contact with the most homeowners, every day or week. These are people like, I'll post a whole list, but these are people like maybe they work for homeowner association management companies. Maybe they're a handyman or they work in the maintenance industry like a HVAC person, a plumber, electrician, preachers. Preachers are a great one because people that are real active in churches and organizations, they come in contact with a ton of people and they have a lot of influence. Human resources people that work at, big companies, basically people that just come into a lot of contact with people. And these are the people you almost need to be best friends about, because when somebody says, hey, I'm thinking about selling my house, these are the people that are going to tell other people about you. Now, you can't really call these people and just go, hey, do you know anybody selling a house? And then when they say no, you just go, okay, bye. You need to build relationships with them. This is where Facebook comes in, and it's great for this. You need to become genuinely interested in their lives. If they put pictures up of a new grandkid on Facebook, send them a message, through Facebook is the easiest way. It's not really intrusive, and they will check that message later on if they're at work or whatever. But these people that you really want to build these relationships with, if they put something up there like they're having a new grandkid or they just had a new baby or whatever it is, send them a message, call them. You can send them a $5 gift card in the mail. Don't be stalkerish, but if there's somebody that sent you a buyer or seller before, invite them to lunch, do something nice with them, do something meaningful. A handwritten note to these people is great. But Facebook's so great too because, it keeps up with everybody's birthday. I mean, birthdays are fantastic reasons. Birthdays and anniversaries are fantastic reasons. And these people that you have in your sphere of influence that connect with a lot of people, you don't want to go on Facebook and just write on their wall. When you see that reminder, you might want to call them. You might want to send them something. You send them a message that says, hey, happy birthday, man. How are things going? How's business going? I look down through my Facebook every morning looking to see if I need to call anybody and who do I need to send a message to. I at least write on their wall, happy birthday. But if they're an influential person that I feel like, hey, this person's going to connect me with other people or they're going to tell people about me, I at least send them a message just saying, hey, happy birthday. I hope you have a great day. How have things been going? It doesn't have to be anything long and drawn out. If you really want to impress people, a handwritten note really works because nobody ever does it anymore. But these are the people that come in contact with a ton of people. You need to be friends with them. You can't bombard them with real estate stuff and begging for referrals every day. You need to build relationships with your sphere of influence, and especially these really important people. Now, let's talk about the rest of your list. Everybody else. The person you went to high school that works in a factory. Maybe they still wait tables at some restaurant. Who knows what they're doing, but they don't really have a real professional career. The truth about these people is they come into contact with a lot of people too. Stay-at-home moms. They come in contact with other moms. These people, they also have family. They have parents. They have cousins. They have, nephews and stuff that are buying houses. Now, you're probably thinking, these people, they already know somebody that knows a realtor. And that's true. But they probably don't remember that they know somebody that sells real estate. I'll tell you guys a story. I have a cousin that she lived in New York. And, I've seen them on major holidays. I've seen them at Christmas, Thanksgiving, all of those big holidays. I've been in the real estate business about 2 years. They decided they wanted to buy a vacation home in the Myrtle Beach area. And guess what? I see these people at least 4 or 5 times a year. They did not know I sell real estate. So they bought a $500,000 home, and they did not use me as a realtor. And, I've got a pretty close, tight-knit family, and I lost a $15,000 paycheck because I never told people in my family at Christmas really much about me selling real estate. I would go and hang out with them when we talk about stuff. But I never said, hey, I sold a house down here, or I sold a house over there, or whatever. My mom brought it up to them because my mom was more upset than me about it. I was kind of like, I was disappointed, but my mom was more upset about me. And she said, I didn't really know Jason sells real estate. But my story even gets better. Like 5 years later, my cousin and her husband, they were getting a divorce. The judge orders them to pick a realtor and sell the house, and they sold the house for $500,000. And again, they did not use me. And I mean, her husband, they're divorced. They've been divorced forever. And I mean, I still talk to the guy. He's a nice guy. He was part of my family for years. But I lost another $15,000 check. And like 6 months later, she's telling the story about selling the house. And she said then, at the time I was doing some property management. I had other things going on too. I was still selling real estate, but she didn't know I was still in the business. I just never talked about real estate or being in the real estate industry with my family. I figured they didn't want to hear about it, and I didn't want to talk about it, all the time with them. I didn't want to bombard them about it. So what I'm telling you is you just can't be a secret agent. Sometimes I'll post like funny stories that I hear, funny stories that I'm involved in on my Facebook page. And sometimes it's just so that people click like on it, and just to remind them, hey, I sell real estate, without actually bombarding people with my new listing that I listed last week, So these random people that Facebook's a great free tool for working that sphere of influence. In my opinion, when I really got a hang of using Facebook and I started working my sphere of influence through that versus sending postcards and letters and calling, 15 people a day that were in my sphere of influence and stuff. When I started using Facebook, it was like a super time saver for me because I can contact 10 or 15 people within 10 or 15 minutes, and that's all I have to do. Facebook is the best CRM management tool you can have. There's a list feature in your Facebook that you can put your friends, family, your sphere that you want to build better relationships into this list. You can actually sort it by the list, so everybody that's in that list, you can see what they posted today. And it makes it really easy to go down through it and click like, make a comment, send a message to somebody about something significant going on in their life. The more people you interact with too on Facebook, the more people that see your post show up in their news feeds. So when you do post something about real estate and you've been interacting with people all day, more people are going to see it. The key to this whole thing is just to build relationships and keep in contact with people. You don't have to have 15-minute phone calls. You don't have to send them 10 postcards a year. Christmas cards are great. I'm not going to tell you not to do that because I like to send Christmas cards too. But just every so often, you just need to touch base with some of these people and just go, hey, what's going on? I haven't talked to you in a while. What are you up to nowadays? They'll ask you what you're up to. You tell them you're selling real estate. And, working your sphere of influence is pretty easy, especially with, social media. And especially with Facebook notifying us about all these life events and changes in people's lives. I've taken up 40 minutes of today's workshop already, but next week I want to tie everything together. I want to talk to you about your listing presentation, how to build a team, who your first hire should be. It's probably not going to be who we typically think it is. And I'm going to tie these 3 weeks in together next week. Anyway, Gene, I want to wrap this up so we have time for some question and answers. Gene's in here. Gene, do you want to talk a couple of minutes? Let's see, Lisa, can you hear Gene? Okay, yeah, we can hear you now. There you go. Well, yeah, I wanted you to tell them who you are. You were the man. You were the superstar at one of the biggest franchises in the world. What do you think the future for EXP is? And for you guys that don't know, Gene is actually on the board at EXP. So if somebody's thinking about making a change in their market, and for some reason EXP isn't there, or they're thinking or EXP is in their market, what should they do, Gene? Gene, I think Erica had a question for you. She said, as a 1.5 year agent, how would you say the PD ops compare with EXP and Keller Williams? Oh, professional development and training. How does that compare with EXP and Keller Williams?